This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Rowan Quinn. Coming up, the businesses fined for COVID breaches, but no one knows who's paid up. Hundreds of creditors gather around the country to hear about the future of Mount Ruapehu as a ski field. How your debit or credit card will soon be used be your new ticket to public transport. Situation's vacant. The UK is looking for its third Prime Minister in 4 months after Liz Truss resigns. A new Plymouth family says Kainga Ora tenants living next door to their elderly mother are making her life a misery. Cyclists can now call the AA. And we find out how a university garden is helping to feed hungry students. You can watch us on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
Good afternoon, I'm Evie Ashton. Fines totalling almost $400,000 were handed out in the 4 months while the COVID protection framework was in place. However, the agency in charge of enforcing the rules, WorkSafe, has no idea how many have been paid. There were 66 fines handed out to 22 businesses for not checking vaccine passes or not displaying the necessary signs.
Once it gets handed into Ministry of Justice, then the role of the regulator or the issuing authority, that ends at that point, and then it's the Ministry of Justice then follow through the process around collection and then their own internal processes, if you like, as to the ongoing non-payment.
A Ministry of Justice spokesperson says they don't know how many have been paid because it can't distinguish between COVID infringements and other infringements imposed under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Businesses operating in the shadow of Mount Ruapehu are in a holding pattern as the administration of Ruapehu Alpine Lifts continues. Some business owners in Ohakune are devastated by the uncertainty surrounding next year's ski season, while others are taking a wait-and-see approach. TCB Ski Board and Bike Managing Director Ben Wiggins says if RAL can be run better, the future looks good.
It's not going to shut down. It's more a matter of they're going to figure out how to carry on. The assets up there and the value to not only the community but the mountain is something that will always continue. It's just a matter of who and how, and that's the bit that we need to ensure works not only better but works obviously in conjunction with town and local iwi.
A creditors meeting today revealed Ruapehu Alpine Lifts has $44 million of debt. The National Institute of Skills and Technology, Te Pukenga, warns job losses are possible as it tries to cut spending by $35 million. The Institute says the savings are absolutely necessary. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The Institute wants to cut $25 million from its polytechnics and head office and $10 million from its work-based learning section. It says it must make the savings because it's facing rising costs and uncertain foreign enrolments next year. It says its forecast deficit of $63 million this year is not sustainable. The Institute briefed staff on the plan today. It says savings will come from various areas and may include staff changes at a number of polytechnics. The Institute says it needs to emphasise in-work learning and consider the cost of face-to-face and online study.
Britain is set to get a new Prime Minister by the end of next week. The governing Conservative Party has announced details of a fast-tracked contest to choose its leader following Liz Truss's resignation. She stepped down after 6 chaotic weeks in the job, by far the shortest premiership in British history. The Transport Minister believes a single ticketing system for buses, trains and ferries will also have flow-on benefits for drivers. Michael Wood says improved access and increased patronage for public transport will mean safer, less congested roads with reduced emissions. It'll use a range of payment methods such as contactless debit or credit cards, Apple Pay or Google Pay. The new system will be rolled out in stages, starting with Canterbury in 2024. And motorists leaving the major cities for the long weekend are facing long delays with congestion and crashes in Auckland and Wellington this evening. Northbound on State Highway 1 between Waikanae and Ōtaki is currently heavily congested, and motorists are being told to expect delays of up to 30 or more minutes. Southbound traffic out of Auckland is bumper to bumper with a crash causing delays. Meanwhile, the motorway just north of the Harbour Bridge is at a standstill after multi-vehicle crashes. In areas of Hawke's Bay, drivers are advised to take extra care due to surface flooding and potholes. 8 people died in road crashes last Labour weekend. To sport, the Black Ferns coach Wayne Smith believes giving everyone game time in pool play at the Rugby World Cup will hold the team in good stead during the playoffs. Smith has again made a raft of changes for tomorrow's final pool game against Scotland and Whangarei, continuing to rotate his squad. The veteran coach drew a comparison to the 2011 Men's World Cup, where the All Blacks had to call up Stephen Donald from whitebaiting to play in the final.
You need everyone. As we proved in 2011, we need more than everyone. So you just got to be ready for everything. The other part of it for me is this is a really special occasion for all our women, and it's more special if you actually start a match and if you actually play, and so I want it to be really memorable for them.
Former Liverpool great Steven Gerrard has been added to the long list of sacked Premier League managers shown the door about an hour after Aston Villa crumbled to a 3-0 loss to promoted club Fulham. Gerrard had overseen 2 wins from 11 games this season, leaving Villa just above the relegation zone. And a chess scandal has taken a legal twist after teenage American Grandmaster Hans Niemann sued world champion Magnus Carlsen for defamation. Niemann is seeking at least $175 million in damages, claiming he was slandered by Carlsen, the chess.com website, and others when they accused him of cheating, which effectively blacklisted him from professional competitions. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Booker Prize winner Shehan Karanasilaka turns out New Zealand can claim a bit of his success. Joel Little, whose own success with the likes of Lorde and Taylor Swift has enabled a remarkable philanthropic act. And Ned Fletcher explains his belief that the English and Maori versions of the treaty were compatible at the time. Ko Kim Hilaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Rowan Quinn next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel Peninsula and the Central High Country. A few showers becoming confined to Northland tonight, then clearing tomorrow and becoming fine everywhere. Bay of Plenty, also from Taranaki to the Kapiti coast, increasing fine spells. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, mostly cloudy with isolated showers becoming confined to the coast this afternoon, then clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Fine for Nelson and Marlborough, apart from areas of cloud, clearing tomorrow. From Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine, but isolated showers for Bulla and for northern Westland. Fine for Canterbury, apart from a few showers for Banks Peninsula, they're clearing this afternoon. Otago and Southland, partly cloudy with isolated showers, mainly coastal, clearing to fine this evening. Frosts tomorrow morning. And showers are forecast for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you with headlines and traffic at 5:20.
Kia ora, this is Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn. The agency charged with enforcing the vaccine pass rules has no idea how many businesses have paid their fines for not complying. From December to about Easter, lots of businesses had to ask to see vaccine passes and staff had to have one to be allowed to work. WorkSafe was in charge of educating businesses and enforcing the rules. Nearly $400,000 in fines was handed out, but it's unclear how much has been paid. Tom Taylor reports.
Caleb Clegg owns Masterton restaurant St Sebastian.
We decided not to partake in the traffic light system. We didn't say that we were doing it. We weren't saying that we weren't doing it. We just said that as a business we weren't partaking into the contract of the traffic light system.
In January, WorkSafe issued his business with $16,000 worth of fines for not checking vaccine certificates and not displaying vaccine pass signs. But Mr Clegg says he hasn't heard anything since learning the fines had been transferred to the Ministry of Justice for collection.
If they essentially want their money, they'll have to try to get it through a court process, and that's pretty much where we're at now.
Mr Clegg says he never intended to pay the fines, but expected that they would become null and void since the vaccine mandates are now over. In the 4 months the framework was in place, WorkSafe issued 66 infringement notices to 22 businesses. 61 of those notices were transferred to the Ministry of Justice, with fines totalling $373,000. But WorkSafe has no way of knowing how many of their fines will make their way back to the Crown coffers. Rodrigo Nasa owns Tauranga tattoo parlour Hammerhead Tattoos and says he has no intention of paying his $24,000 of fines.
But whatever they send to me, it's going to bin. Simple as that. Until they answer my questions on my email. not just keep sending me, repeating the bill.
Mr. Nasser says he's tried to talk to WorkSafe but hasn't had much success.
So everything is almost like still happening in the clouds, hiding there somewhere. It's hard for me to give you a solid answer because I don't know where we're at.
The owner of Geraldine restaurant Q Foods, Carl Nicholson, is adamant he won't be paying. In February, the business received $20,000 in fines for not checking vaccine passes, displaying signs or QR codes.
I'm not paying for the fine regardless of what happens. They can do whatever they want to me, I will not pay that fine.
Mr. Nicholson says communication with authorities since receiving the fines has been limited.
I haven't had anything personally. A good associate took care of all of that through, who was very versed on common law. And the fine will disappear if it hasn't already. I haven't actually heard.
Head of the General Inspectorate at WorkSafe, Simon Humphreys, says most businesses complied with their responsibilities under the COVID-19 protection framework, with only a small number not following the rules.
We very much took a high engagement and education role right throughout our COVID response. But when there was sustained non-compliance by that very small number, then the next, escalation of our response was to issue infringement notices.
After issuing fines to businesses and serving reminder notices, WorkSafe transfers the infringement notices to the Ministry of Justice. But neither WorkSafe nor the Ministry of Justice know how much has been paid so far, if anything at all. Mr. Humphreys says it's the same story with any enforcement agency. Police may not know how many speeding tickets they issue actually get paid.
Once it gets handed into Ministry of Justice, then the role of the regulator or the issuing authority, that ends at that point, and then it's the Ministry of Justice then followed through the process around collection, and then their own internal processes, if you like, as to the ongoing non-payment.
A Ministry of Justice spokesperson says they don't know how many have been paid because they can't distinguish between COVID infringements and other infringements imposed under the Health and Safety at Work Act. It's now in the hands of individual district courts to enforce the payments.
That was Tom Taylor reporting, and let us know what you think about that. Should those businesses have to pay up, or do you think it should all be forgotten now that the mandates are gone? You can text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's 11 minutes past 5. Well, the books for Ruapehu Alpine Lifts have been thrown open today, revealing more than $40 million of debt, including $700,000 in holiday pay owed to staff working on both sides of the mountain. More than 500 people from around the country attended a Creditors meeting, either online or in person, to hear about the future of the mountain. Some are optimistic, but others are worried, and some don't know what to think yet. In a moment, we'll hear from the Administrator, John Fisk, but first, this from reporter Jimmy Allingham at the Central Plateau.
At Whakapapa ski field, dozens of creditors showed up to examine the finances of the Ruapehu Alpine Lifts and vote on the company administration's next steps. And while it was revealed the company is $44.3 million in debt, those RNZ spoke to were optimistic a solution could be found to keep the ski slopes open. Among the Life Pass holders there is Gordon Horsley from Auckland.
So they've a continued administration, and then the second phase is appointing a creditors committee, so pretty positive actually in terms of what's going on. They seem to be really quite focused on continuing with the business and making it go, because there's obviously a lot of stakeholders, wider community groups, and a lot of interest in the mountain, pretty emotionally tied to the place as well.
Those ties span decades.
Originally from Wanganui, so I've been skiing here since I was 4, so 55 years, so been a while.
Life Pass holder Vanessa from Hawke's Bay is also hopeful the mountain will reopen next year.
Feeling very positive about future existence of this fabulous Ruapehu ski complex.
So today won't be your last day on the slopes?
Hopefully not, no, but we're heading back up there to ski what is just a fantastic field.
As the meeting wore on, a steady throng of skiers and snowboarders turned out for this season's final weekend. Snowboarder Lee Hunter comes to Whakapapa every weekend from Auckland and says he can't imagine staying home.
It's like the most beautifulest place in the whole of the North Island is right here, Ruapehu. Well, you got the best cafe, the highest cafe in the whole of the North Island, and it's stunning up there, and it's just, you don't get a nicer spot.
The Life Pass holders RNZ spoke to all emphasised that the effects of RAL's woes are most acute for the towns and businesses around the mountain. In National Park, the Alpine Centre owner Shona Forbes isn't sure what to think. ahead of the summer season. Her business rents and sells outdoor gear.
Well, it will seriously affect us if they don't manage to get things sorted before next winter. And also the summer program with the gondola, that's going to have a big effect on the local community, because we're only just trying to come back into that tourism, sort of market. We were hoping that maybe this summer the international visitor would start looking at the gondola as well.
In Hoakune, some workers say they are too upset to talk, while others are taking a wait-and-see approach. Sapphire Map, manager of Toasty Hoakune Cafe, says the area is looking to diversify away from a reliance on snow.
I'm pretty excited for summer. I think that'll be cool to see what happens over summer. I think it'll be like a nice little change. Hopefully they put in some new bike trails and stuff, something like that. I feel like they're going to have to change, which I think will be good, because then if we get another good winter, at least, we can have both. We can have a summer and a winter here, rather than mainly being focused on a winter town.
TCB Ski Board and Bike Managing Director Ben Wiggins says if the ski slope company can be run better, the future looks good.
It's not going to shut down. It's more a matter of they're going to figure out how to carry on. The assets up there and the value to not only the community but the mountain is something that will always continue. It's just a matter of who and how, and that's the bit that we need to ensure works not only better but works obviously in conjunction with town and local iwi. So that's a bit we all want to be mindful of.
The mountain will close for the season on Monday. When and if it opens again could be revealed in the coming months.
John Fisk from PwC is a voluntary administrator, and I asked him to explain RAL's debt.
There's $44 million in creditor claims that we are now aware of. And then on top of that, there is the liability to the LifePass members, and that the process of actually valuing the LifePass claims is still to be worked through, but we know that it'll be significant.
And so, what's the plan from here on in?
Well, there's two resolutions that were voted on at the meeting. One was whether we should be changed as voluntary administrators, and that resolution didn't pass because no one else was nominated, and so our position as voluntary administrators was confirmed. And then there was a vote on whether a creditor committee should be established. There was about 500 people at the meeting, so we're still working through the voting on that, but we think that the process will result in a committee being formed, and now what we need to do is establish who will be part of that committee, which is going to be confirmed hopefully fairly shortly.
I guess the big question, John, is will people be able to ski next year? What do you think the chances are?
Well, that's what we're working very hard to do. We're working collaboratively with secured creditors for that very objective. I can't tell you today that will definitely happen, but as soon as I have better clarity, I'll be able to update you on that. But that is very much our aim, is that we want to be open for 2023.
How do you think it's come to this? What's happened here?
Well, there's a range of things. As is always the case when a business fails, there's usually more than one thing. But a lot of it can be attributed to COVID and a really tough ski season this year. So it's 3 years of really adverse conditions that the businesses had to deal with. But on top of that, there's some other historical issues, and the most important of which I think is just the maintenance that is needed on the equipment that's on the mountain has been deferred to the extent that really the cost of actually upgrading it became too much for the business, and with the lack of cash being generated, it resulted in the failure.
So you can't say for sure whether the ski fields will be able to be opened next year. Is this 50-50? Is it 80-20?
I wouldn't want to put an estimate on it. What I will do is update you as soon as I know. But we're incredibly heartened by the number of people that turned out today that really expressed a passion for keeping the operation going. They are very positive about it and wanting to contribute in our endeavour to find a solution. So, that's really important. And then in the last week, we have had meetings with iwi and with other key stakeholders who have all expressed a desire to see the situation move from something which is bad news and make something good of it that actually is really going to be sustained for a long time in the future.
Well, on that note, I mean, you're talking about the level of upgrade that's needed. It's already very expensive to go skiing, and you've got so many people coming there and putting a lot of money into it, but it's obviously not enough. How is this a viable operation long term?
That's what we need to explore over the next few months. So one of the things that we have applied for is an extension to the watershed meeting, which normally has to be held within 25 days of our appointment. That's now been pushed out until the 9th of May 2023 at the latest, so we could call the meeting earlier if we need to. But the reason why we've asked for that extension of time is to give ourselves space to be able to come up with a viable solution.
Could you consider splitting those Turoa and Whakapapa into two separate operations, or only running one of them? Is that something that's being considered?
All options are on the table right now. What we do recognise is that there is different interests in either side of the mountain, and so I'm certainly not discounting the possibility that there could be two separate operations. As I said, everything's on the table at the moment.
That was John Fisk from PwC. It's 21 minutes past 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora e te iwi. Coming up, the UK needs a new PM again. We'll have all the fallout from Downing Street. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at checkpointrnz, Facebook us or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Now it's time for the headlines with Evie.
Fines totalling almost $400,000 were handed out in the 4 months while the COVID protection framework was in place. However, the agency in charge of enforcing the rules, WorkSafe, has no idea how many have been paid. There were 66 fines handed out to 22 businesses. A creditors meeting for Ruapehu Alpine Lifts at the Whakapapa ski field has been held today. John Fisk from PwC told Checkpoint the company owes creditors $44 million, plus what's likely to be a significant amount to people who purchased life passes. He says the administrators are working with secured creditors to make skiing possible next year. The Secondary Principals Association says schools must work urgently to improve students' literacy and numeracy. In a trial of new NCEA tests in July, just 34% of teenagers passed in writing, 56% passed maths, and in reading, 64% passed. The National Institute of Skills and Technology, Te Pūkenga, says it must cut spending by $35 million a year as it faces a $63 million deficit. It warns job losses are possible. And a new ticketing system designed to make it easier for people to get on a bus, train or ferry is to be rolled out across the country. People will no longer have to use a different transport card in each city and will instead be able to pay with a credit or debit card or methods like Google Pay. Rollout begins in 2024. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, a listener sitting in traffic north of Wellington says the delay between Waikanai and Otaki is almost 2 hours long for holiday traffic. Roads in Auckland are congested in all directions. If you're hands-free and not moving and you want to let us know how the long weekend traffic is for you, text us on 2101. Also, State Highway 2 at Waiotahi in the Waikato is still closed because of that slip and will stay closed overnight. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
An Aussie crowd of almost 50,000 stands between the Black Caps and a winning start at the cricket's T20 World Cup. The New Zealand men's side begin their tournament against Australia at the Sydney Cricket Ground tomorrow night. Well, here with more is sports reporter Clay Wilson. Hi, Clay.
Hi, Rowan.
So the big names are set to sort of step up for the T20 World Cup this weekend, and the Black Caps are right in the thick of it.
Yeah. So the T20 World Cup actually started last weekend with some of the lesser-known nations trying to qualify for this stage of the tournament, which is called the Super 12 stage, and this is where the Black Caps and the other sort of big-name teams come into the tournament. And a big game first up for New Zealand, playing against Australia, the hosts, at the Sydney Cricket Ground, almost 50,000. I'm assuming most of them wearing some form of gold or yellow, cheering on Australia. So it'd be a pretty amazing atmosphere for the Black Caps to be a part of, and notable for a couple of reasons this game, not just a Trans-Tasman fixture, but it's a rematch of the final from last year's T20 World Cup. Unfortunately, the Black Caps losing that game, but a bit of a rematch chance there for revenge for New Zealand. And it's also, the first game of the Super 12 stage of the tournament. And if the Black Caps can win, they can make a bit of a statement, and they can also go a long way to finishing in the top two in their group. So 6 teams in their group, and they finish in the top 2. They'll go through to that, but won't be the biggest game of the weekend, because on Sunday night, India are playing Pakistan at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Almost 100,000 people in there. Such a cauldron that venue is. Tickets for that game sold out in 5 minutes. Almost 100,000 tickets snapped up in the space of 5 minutes, which for people who know India and Pakistan and how mad they are about cricket, not hugely surprising. The 2019 World Cup game, 270 million viewers watched that game when they last played. And also important because these teams don't play each other at home. The political tensions between the two countries mean they don't visit each other and play, for a long time now, for about 10 years since they last played a proper series against each other in one of the countries. So a big game to look forward to on Sunday night as well.
Yeah, and now switch to chess, Clay. What's the latest in this saga about that 5 times world chess champion?
Yeah, so the man you're referring to there is Magnus Carlsen. He's the 5-time world champ, and the other player involved here is a young American teenager, just 19 years old, by the name of Hans Niemann. And they played a game back in September last month, and then after the game, a few weeks after the game, Carlsen came out and basically alleged that Niemann had been cheating, and all sorts of allegations and stories have been flying around about this situation. But basically it's come out today that Niemann, the younger player, is suing Carlsen. Not just Carlsen, he's suing chess.com, which is the big chess website, and some other people for slander and libel, and get this, to the tune of $175 million is the lawsuit.
Wow.
So it's big money, and you think, where does that come from in chess? Well, the Grand Chess Tour has 5 events annually, and it's got a pool of $2.5 million. Very popular thing. And Carlsen, his estimated earnings for his career somewhere between $10 and $15 million, depending on where you look. So chess, it might seem like a bit of a hobby or a game that people play, from time to time, but it's big money, and $175 million lawsuit here. It's going to get interesting.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thanks very much, Clay, and enjoy your busy weekend of sport. Thanks very much. Well, the UK is looking for its 3rd Prime Minister in 4 months after Liz Truss bowed to pressure and quit overnight. She'd only been in the top job for 44 days and is now the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. The man she replaced, Boris Johnson, is eyeing a comeback, and her replacement will be chosen next Friday. The beleaguered Conservative Party's trying to move quickly to put the chaos behind them, but with a cost of living crisis and a looming recession, the turmoil is far from over. Matthew Hutching reports.
Just 6 short weeks ago, the UK's new Prime Minister Liz Truss stood behind a lectern outside her new home at number 10 Downing Street.
I'm honoured to take on this responsibility at a vital time for our country.
Overnight, she was back, standing behind the same lectern, but with a very different message.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
In just 44 days, it was all over. The shortest reign of any British Prime Minister, by quite some margin. Undone by a bungled mini-budget, uncosted tax cuts, sacking her Chancellor, bringing in a new one from the other side of the party.
We are a country that funds our promises and pays our debts. And when that is questioned, as it has been, this government will take the difficult decisions necessary to ensure there is trust and confidence in our national finances.
Jeremy Hunt then burning most of her fiscal plan, leaving Truss rudderless, a powerless premier. Her time was up. It was not if, but when.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter.
And then came the tipping point. The chaotic and barely believable scenes in the Houses of Parliament as the government tried to push through a bill on fracking.
Members are expected to be able to vote without fear or favour.
Yes.
I saw members being physically manhandled into another lobby and being bullied.
And then, just after lunch on a gloomy Thursday afternoon, it was officially all over.
I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
And on potential successors...
Hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
A familiar name, Boris Johnson. The man forced to resign in July after personal scandals became too much, his position becoming untenable.
Boris Johnson is a winner, and I think that will help.
You know, I went to my constituency at the weekend, and the strong message that I got was, bring back Boris Johnson.
The new Prime Minister will be in place next Friday. Candidates have to have the backing of 100 MPs to be in the running for the top job. But Labour leader Keir Starmer says the whole country should be voting.
This is not just a soap opera at the top of the Tory party. It's doing huge damage to our economy and to the reputation of our country. We can't have a revolving door of chaos.
Truss's tenure was so short, she hadn't even met the First Minister of Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon, clear on what needs to happen next.
Well, on a UK level, there must be a general election. It is a democratic necessity.
Truss's time was short, but eventful.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world.
The shortest serving Prime Minister, the last to meet the longest reigning monarch. Sworn in by Her Majesty the Queen just days before she died.
She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons.
But as news broke of Truss's resignation, the question turns to her replacement and the future of the party.
Extraordinary moment in British political history.
In a little over a week, a new Prime Minister will be moving into the building behind me.
The UK in a cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine amplifying an energy crisis, skyrocketing bills now facing every household in the country. And next week, a third Prime Minister in 4 months, a Conservative party in complete disarray, the chaos by no means over.
It's 5:31 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Time now for the business news with Nona Peltier. Nona, hello. The country's monthly trade deficit fell last month. And so what does that tell us about the economy?
Okay, so what it says is that our exports rose, 37%, that's the value of our exports, to $6 billion. And our imports, they also rose, 1.1 billion to 7.6 billion. I'm going to do the maths for you. That's a trade deficit of 1.6 million. So how you do that is you subtract the exports and the imports from the exports, and then that's your deficit. That means that that's the part that we haven't made up, I guess. So our export dollars was mostly driven by dairy, but we bought more imports than really we earned in export dollars. That's pretty good. It's narrowed a bit. However, it's still 3 times what it was a year ago. And that means that we are still paying the price for our low value dollar, and it's going to continue to be inflationary.
And a couple of big public companies have raised their profit forecasts this morning. And so what companies are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about some of the biggest ones. So we're talking about Mainfreight, which is a logistics company. Their underlying profit expectations are up 2/3 in the first half. They're expecting to make, $300 million in 6 months. It's a heck of a lot of money. Yeah. That's a 66% gain over the year earlier. And that's mostly because of the freight that's going on. But then they're also passing on extra costs. So that's, there's great demand at the moment, obviously. Also for warehousing. That's another bit of business that they do. Mercury is the other company. It's increased its profit outlook by $40 million. And that's really because the North Island power generators have benefited from all that heavy rain we had over the winter months. So that would have been like from July to September. A lot of rain in the hydro lakes is good news for power companies. There you go.
Very good. And the markets, Nona.
So while we did have those very strong results, main freight was initially up 7%, but through the day, the sentiment has turned. So they finished up 3.23%. Mercury up slightly only, just barely a cent. And so overall, we fell 0.5%. That's the NZX Top 50. It was a 50-point drop to 10,782. That's in line with what we've been seeing in Asia. Again, it's the same story. The big US dollar, it tends to dominate everything, along with interest rate risk. So 56.6 US, 90.3 Australian, and 50.5 British pence.
Thank you very much for that, Nona. A new Plymouth family says Kāinga Ora tenants living next door to their elderly mother are making her life a misery, and the agency just fobs off their complaints. The woman, who's about to turn 80, feels unsafe in her own home, and the family's had to put her up in hotels to give her some respite from her neighbours. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
The woman's lived alone in the leafy inner city street for about 10 years after downsizing from the family home nearby. His son, who asked that they not be identified because they fear retribution, says problems with the Kāinga Ora tenants next door began about 3 years ago.
Their noise, their cars, people coming and going all hours of the night, revving cars, loud music, fires, banging, hammering, screaming, shouting, all the rest of it.
He says they've called noise control dozens of times and made multiple complaints to Kāinga Ora, all to no avail. It's taking a toll on his mother.
Her nerves are shattered, so to speak. She is very anxious about these people next door. So her mental health has suffered a lot. She has had to go on antidepressants and sleeping pills to deal with the anxiety that she's experiencing.
Even the personal approach had failed.
I'm afraid of them, Robin. The one time I did go over that wasn't good, and previous tenants have actually come onto our property and we've had to call the police and get trespass orders against them.
He can't understand why Kāinga Ora isn't able to move unruly tenants on more quickly or vet them more carefully in the first place. Kāinga Ora Regional Director Graham Broderick says the vast majority of its 200,000 tenants are good neighbours and members of their communities. But he acknowledges in a small number of cases, disruptive behaviour causes highly stressful and unacceptable conditions for neighbours.
We are aware of this situation and appreciate that this has been a stressful and upsetting situation for the neighbour. Neighbours cannot be expected to put up with intolerable situations, and we are committed to effectively responding to disruptive behaviour when it occurs.
Broderick says Kāinga Ora's first approach is to support change in behaviour, but it can and does move people on where necessary. He says they're working hard on a solution in this case. The Citizens Advice Bureau Deputy Chief Executive Andrew Hubbard says under the Residential Tenancy Act, Kāinga Ora can seek to move antisocial tenants on or terminate tenancies. He advises distraught neighbours to find out whether either of these steps have been taken.
You could ask whether or not they've issued a warning under Section 55A of the Residential Tenancies Act about antisocial behaviour. And that's often could be a trigger point for a change in behaviour if the tenant's aware that if they receive 3 of those, their tenancy could be ended.
Hubbard says it's not unusual to hear of disputes with Kāinga Ora tenants.
It's very tricky, of course, for Kāinga Ora who wants to maintain people in housing, which is absolutely essential to try and resolve this issue. So, it is difficult for them.
Meanwhile, the New Plymouth family is seeking legal advice about whether it can seek recompense for hotel expenses incurred giving their mother a break from her neighbours.
With the cost of food soaring, many students are struggling to eat well, but a garden at Canterbury University is helping to feed many. Today marks 20 years since a group of students turned a lawn into the Waiutu Community Garden. Rachel Graham went for a look as they prepared to celebrate the milestone.
Fourth-year student Imo McRae is one of about a dozen volunteers who turn up to Waiutu Community Garden each Friday to learn some skills, put in some work and pick up a free bag of vegetables.
There's pretty much always leafy greens and herbs, and at the moment we've got lots of lemons, leeks, beetroot, and then over summer, which we're heading towards now, there'll be things like tomatoes and capsicums, chilies, eggplants.
For a student on a limited income, the free veggies make a huge difference.
Key thing that I've noticed is that while my peers might be complaining about how expensive spinach is, I don't even notice because I don't need to buy it anymore because I just get it fresh from the garden.
Ariel Sir Tudor is another regular volunteer, and she says the community garden is good for her mental health and her wallet.
I can make an entire week's meal of lots of soups and stuff entirely just from the garden and not relying on supermarkets at all. You get used to it over the 5 years. You get used to figuring out ways to use all of the vegetables.
Twins Jess and Caitlin Lamb are in the university halls, so can't make as much use of the free veggies, but say gardening isn't just about the produce.
Just the atmosphere and getting away from uni life, it's pretty chill. And meeting like-minded people, because if you're in the halls you just meet people of a similar age to you, and there's a lot of people who aren't into gardening, so it's a good chance to meet third years and fourth years and that kind of thing.
The garden was set up in 2002 by a university environment club called Kakariki, who wanted students to have access to good quality food and gardening skills. The university's sustainability manager, Matt Morris, oversees it. While the garden was pretty unusual 20 years ago, he says now it's used in formal teaching.
Because it was always this lovely thing you can come and do on a Friday afternoon, just hang out with people, learn some skills, get some free food. But now a lot of courses actually include visits to the community garden or using it as a teaching tool, which is really nice.
And it's now more valuable than ever with the cost of living soaring. Today, many of those who helped turn the grass lawn into a haven of productivity are gathering at the gardens to celebrate all they have achieved, probably leaving with a nice big bag of silver beet.
It's 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora e te iwi. Do get in touch with your thoughts and feedback. You can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time for the headlines now with Evie.
Kia ora, Rowan. The agency charged with enforcing the vaccine pass rules has no idea how many businesses have paid their fines for not complying. From December to about Easter, many businesses were required to ask to see vaccine passes. The head of WorkSafe's General Inspectorate, Simon Humphreys, says most businesses complied with the regulations. While nearly $400,000 in fines were handed out, it's not clear how many have been paid because COVID-related fines can't be differentiated from others. The administrator for the company operating the North Island's only ski fields says a poor snow season coming on top of COVID and a legacy of deferred maintenance is to blame for its financial woes. John Fisk from PwC has told Checkpoint the company owes creditors $44 million, plus what's likely to be a significant amount to people who purchased life passes. He says 3 years of COVID restrictions were tough, but there were long-term problems. The actor, Kevin Spacey, has defeated a sexual abuse case against him. New York jurors found his accuser, Anthony Rapp, didn't prove his claim that the Oscar winner made an unwanted sexual advance on him when he was 14. And 5 Australian women have begun legal action against officials in Qatar 2 years after they were strip-searched and subjected to invasive internal examinations on the tarmac at Doha's International Airport. They were among dozens of women who were examined. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, State Highway 1 is packed in Wellington, heading north from Waikanai to the Pika Pika merge. After Otaki, it clears, busy again through Levin. The Desert Road is heavy northbound and there are roadworks slowing things down. State Highway 2 at Waiotahi in the Waikato is still closed because of a slip, and that will stay that way overnight. Earlier crashes have been cleared for Auckland, so there's just the holiday traffic to contend with, and the rest of the main routes around the country are looking pretty good. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback, and it is flooding in about the story of businesses fined for COVID breaches. As we reported, there's no record of who's paid their fines, and some of the people in this story saying they won't be paying theirs. This person says all fines for infringement of COVID rules should be paid. They repeatedly broke the law after being warned and educated in the softly approach. Enforce those fines. Another person says, of course, those businesses should pay their fines. Forgiving them would be a slap in the face for all the businesses that respected people's health and well-being by complying with the mandates. And this one says they must pay up or do a week in jail. The law is there for everyone, and the alternative is anarchy. Keep it coming in on 2101 or checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Well, your credit or debit card will soon be your new ticket to public transport. A new ticketing system will be rolled out across the country to make it easier for commuters to take a bus, train or ferry, regardless of what city they're in. Commuters at Auckland's central train hub in Britomart were positive about the plan.
Some people miss their trains trying to top up the hop card and just be quicker.
I think it's a good thing, questioning the amount of money that's involved in rolling it out.
Yeah, I think it makes life a bit easier, doesn't it? Rather than having to go and purchase a hop card, which is quite difficult. They're hard to find stores that sell them. But hopefully you can use it right across the network as well.
That would be equivalent to our Oyster card, your AT card. So you tap your credit card, you get the cheapest rate. The hop card, you have to top it up, don't you? There's always money on my credit card, so I could go on a long journey and not be stuck having to quickly top up my card. I think it's much better coming directly out of your account than the hop card.
Transport Minister Michael Wood talked me through the rollout.
What we've done today is signed the contract and confirmed that all councils in New Zealand are working on the national ticketing solution. The first place this will roll out in is Christchurch, and we expect that to be in mid-2024, and we'll then progressively roll it out around the rest of the country.
Any hints as to who's next cab off the rank after Christchurch?
That'll be worked through with the different councils, and to a degree it's shaped by when their contracts with existing providers come around, when their technology platforms need to be replaced. So we'll just work that carefully through and we'll step it in. And we expect to transition between 2024 and 2026 to have the whole country covered by this new solution, which is going to make public transport better and easier to use for Kiwis.
Yeah, well, can you tell us a bit more about why you're moving to do this?
There are a number of really big benefits. The first is that we just want to make public transport as easy as possible for people to use. So under the national ticketing solution, you'll be able to use your existing debit card, credit card, or a digital solution on your phone, and that'll effectively be your way of getting onto public transport. You won't have to have a separate card. You won't have to top up your account balance. It just takes all of the friction out of it. Secondly, it's one system for the whole country. So no matter where you are, you'll be able to use public transport quickly and easily. So real benefits. Fundamentally, it's about making it better and easier for the public to use public transport.
And so does that mean we'll be throwing away our hop cards and snapper cards and B cards and all the other ones around the country?
That's right. You won't need those anymore. At home, we've got a little box with all of the cards if we're going on a holiday to Napier or Wellington or Christchurch, and it just makes it extra complicated. You won't need any of that under the national ticketing solution. And in addition, the way it's set up means that whatever fare discounts the council has set up in the system, when you go on your public transport journey, you'll automatically get the cheapest fare that you can get based on those discounts that have been loaded in. So it takes all of the complexity out of it for the public transport user and just opens it up to be an easy-to-use system.
Is there going to be, how at the moment if you pay wave, you get a bit of a charge? Is that going to happen for people? An extra charge for using the pay wave system?
No, under the NTS there'll be nothing like that. You'll simply be using your existing cards to pay the public transport fare for the service that you are using. There'll be no additional costs which come into you from that point of view.
Do you have any targets associated with this, like, the number of people that you hope it might, coax into using public transport more regularly?
Well, the contract we've signed is with a company called Cubic, who are the world's leading provider of these services. They provide these services like the Oyster card in London, they do New York, they do Chicago, they do Gold Coast. And we had the president of the company here this morning for the launch. And he said that in most other places where these systems had been set up, there was pretty quickly a 10 to 20% increase in public transport patronage. because you just take away a little bit of the friction and a little bit of the complexity, and it makes it easier for people to give public transport a go. So I think that'll definitely be a big benefit.
What's the sort of degree of work involved here? How complicated is it to get everybody on that one system?
There is a huge amount of work that has to be done to get us there. A lot of it has already been done, but there is some more to do. We need to make sure that we have the back office IT systems to support the system. We need to work with all of the different public transport authorities around the country, across different regional councils who currently all have different systems to get them onto the same platform. We obviously, with any new system, need to test it out to make sure that it works before it goes live. So there is a fair bit of work to do, and we're taking the approach of measuring twice and cutting once. We want to make sure that we get it right before it's implemented. But I'm confident we'll get there. And as I say, Kiwis can have confidence that we have one of the world's best and most renowned providers of these services now setting this up in New Zealand. And actually, we will be about the first place in the world with a whole-of-country solution like this. So this is really taking us to the head of the pack.
On a related note, we've still got those half-price public transport fares in place at the moment, high cost of living, high petrol, high inflation. Do you think you're going to have to keep those in place for perhaps longer than you first envisaged?
Well, the half-price public transport fares, they go through until January of 2023. We've indicated very clearly that at that point those discounts will not continue across the board. But at the same time, we have set up the Community Connect card. That'll mean that for the lowest income New Zealanders, that half-price public transport fare will become permanent, and that'll be beneficial to about 1 million New Zealanders who have access to the Community Services card. So we'll continue to provide targeted support to those Kiwis who need it the most.
And that was Transport Minister Michael Wood. It's just coming up to 10 to 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Well, cyclists who get a flatty can now call the AA. It's extended its roadside assistance to push bikes after bringing in the service for e-bikes 4 years ago. Dougal Swift from the AA joins me now. Hi, Dougal.
Hi, Ron. How are you?
Good. Why include push bikes now?
I guess two reasons. One, we want to give members support for all their mobility solutions, and if we can do a little bit to help encourage people to use their bike on the way to work and not be concerned about a flat tyre, and maybe that gives them just that extra bit of encouragement they need to get into a more sustainable means of transport, then it's got to be a good thing.
And is this an add-on to your kind of standard AA membership, or is there a special cycle-only one that you can get?
This is included in all our 1.1 personal members' standard road service benefits at no extra cost.
And any plans to do a cyclist-only one?
We've considered that, and that is a possibility. We'll see how demand goes for our standard membership product first.
And so you've been doing this a while for e-bike customers. How's that going? Do you get many call-outs?
Not a huge number for the e-bikes yet, but the volume is starting to slowly grow. Obviously, there's been big investment in cycling infrastructure, fuel pricing is high, people are more conscious about the environmental impact of their mobility. So we're seeing some slow but steady growth.
And, you know, what sort of things, is it for a flat tyre or a flat battery? What sort of things are you getting called out for?
Exactly those two things, flat tyres and flat batteries.
I'm guessing that there's a few restrictions, I guess, when you're bringing this in for push bikes. Like, will you be able to, you know, go up a mountain bike trail or that kind of thing?
No, it is the commuter service. So it's for, you know, sealed public roads where our patrol vehicles are able to get easy access, just like your car.
Look, thanks very much for that. That's Dougal Swift from the AA. And it's just coming up 8 minutes to 6 here on Checkpoint. Residents in the northern Victorian town of Echuca on the Murray River have had a temporary reprieve from the threat of flooding. Forecasters have revised their predictions and are now saying the river level will likely peak over the weekend. The ABC's Oliver Gordon reports.
The community of Echuca has been on a roller coaster ride this week. It had been predicted the Murray River could reach its peak and impact up to 2,000 homes by today. It's now expected to reach its forecast high of 95 metres on Tuesday. Bureau of Meteorology senior forecaster Jonathan Howe says predicting river rises in this part of the world is never easy.
That's where two other rivers kind of meet. So the Campaspe River coming in from the south and also the Goulburn River a little bit to the east of Echuca. And the difficulty with the Murray River is that because it is such a major system, there are a lot of creeks and tributaries flowing into the river. So it can be quite difficult to forecast when each of those peaks come through.
Large parts of the town are now heavily fortified, thanks largely to thousands of volunteers who've spent days sandbagging and helping to construct a 2-kilometre levee, which has been dubbed the Great Wall of Echuca. But now that it's started raining here in Echuca, the levee is throwing up some logistical concerns.
So I'm Caden Ellis from Echuca Fire Brigade. Currently what we're doing at the moment is we're pumping the water out of our storm water system back into the river, as due to the fact that we've got all our storm waters closed to stop the river actually trying to come back in. But since we've got a lot of rain coming in, it's got nowhere to go, so we've got to pump it back out over the wall.
So over the next few days, if this rain does come down, you'll be going around to a fair few stormwater drains and actually taking the water out of it and putting it back into the river.
Yes, correct. So we've got strategic locations set up around Echuca. We've got some 30 or 40 pumps set up that can pump upwards. We're aiming to get some that can pump upwards of 1,000 litres a second. So it's moving a lot of water to try and keep the town essentially drowning from the inside out.
Julie Golledge's house is on the wrong side of the levee. The nature strips of the lower-lying houses in her street are starting to go underwater.
Yeah, we have sandbags, we have a pump, we have food, and good spirits, and that's what it's about. And we've got good neighbours around us, so that if we get stuck, we'll call on each other. That's fine.
And you're doing a nightly meeting at 4 o'clock, I'm hearing. How important is that for all of your resilience and mental health?
It's fantastic for our mental health. We just all get together and we can unload, we can share ideas, we share the news, because sometimes we don't watch social media or some of the people don't have social media, and we know what's happening, and it's just a really good social thing, and it's fantastic for our mental health because we can then vent.
And what's going to be the point at which you decide to leave this house for higher ground?
When the water comes in the house. But we are built up, so we shouldn't... The flood prediction, well, who knows. But, when the water gets into the house, we'll leave.
US actor Kevin Spacey has defeated a sexual abuse claim against him. Jurors found that actor Anthony Rapp did not prove his claim that the Oscar winner made a sexual advance on him when he was aged 14. The actor, who's still facing 5 sexual assault charges in the UK, welcomed today's verdict. The BBC's Peter Bowes reports.
This was a case really of two people telling very different stories. The jury decided in less than 90 minutes. It was a swift decision for them, in fact described by Kevin Spacey's lawyers as swift and decisive. And just to recap what the allegations were made by Anthony Rapp, who is also an actor. He was 14 at the time, he says, when he was invited to a party at Kevin Spacey's apartment, and that's where he alleged that this sexual assault happened. He was appearing, really just beginning his Broadway career at that stage. Kevin Spacey also appearing in a play at about that time on Broadway. Kevin Spacey says it didn't happen. And when these allegations were first released, first made by Anthony Rapp, Kevin Spacey actually released a statement on Twitter in which he apologised and said that it must have been a drunken mistake, essentially, if it had happened. And he has later said that he regrets that apology, an apology, he said, for something that didn't happen. And clearly the jury believed his side of the story. This was a civil trial here in the United States. This trial essentially was all about money. Anthony Rapp was claiming some $40 million in damages. And that's the decision that the jury had to make, whether indeed they believed his story, and if they had believed it, whether he should receive some of those damages. He won't be receiving anything. We didn't really get much of a reaction from Anthony Rapp. People in the courtroom say that there wasn't much of an expression on his face. Certainly Kevin Spacey in a much happier mood. He was hugging some of his lawyers and smiling, and has since said that he is deeply thankful for the jury's decision.
Well, staying in the UK as it descends into political chaos, the British tabloid The Daily Star asked a question. Could Liz Truss's leadership outlast a humble lettuce? This morning, that lettuce celebrated its win. As Liz Truss resigned, the lettuce toasted its victory with bubbles and a sausage roll. CNN's Anna Stewart explains.
Utter chaos broken. As Liz Truss's days as Prime Minister became numbered, one British tabloid posed a question that captured a nation. Could she last longer than this lettuce? You may be wondering how it all began. Well, let us explain. An Economist article compared the total days Truss had been in control to roughly the shelf life of a lettuce, which inspired this gem from the Daily Star. Who would perish first? Day or night, the campaign continued. And despite some tough talk from Truss,
I am a fighter and not a quitter.
It was a resounding victory for the Greens.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Officially, the lettuce cannot be tossed into the upcoming leadership race, but remains the Caesar of salads.
Time for some of your feedback now, and this one, in keeping with that last story there, this person, Stuart, says there's at least one stable position at 10 Downing Street. Larry the cat has held the position of chief mouser for over 4,000 days now. He's doing much better than the humans appointed over recent years. Thanks for that, Stuart. And lots on the people who are the businesses who broke the COVID vaccine rules for not asking for people's passes and saying they're not going to pay their fines. Yvonne says, so if they don't pay, does that mean we can all choose not to pay fines, like speeding tickets, for example, when they seem unfair? There's a very common theme, it's fair to say. This person says, hello, Checkpoint. The businesses who fail to comply with the COVID requirements, just get on with it, Justice Department. Pursue those fines. And another one says, no one gets to choose which bits of the law they'll obey. Pay the fines.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The agency charged with enforcing the vaccine pass rules has no idea how many businesses have paid their fines for not complying. From December to about Easter, many businesses were required to ask to see vaccine passes. Head of WorkSafe's General Inspectorate, Simon Humphreys, says most businesses complied with the regulations.
We very much took a high engagement and education role right throughout our COVID response. But when there was sustained non-compliance by that very small number, then the next, escalation of our response was to issue infringement notices.
Nearly $400,000 in fines were handed out, but it's not clear how many have been paid because COVID-related fines can't be differentiated from others. The administrators for the troubled company Ruapehu Alpine Lifts Limited don't know yet whether Whakapapa and Tūroa ski fields will open for business next year. John Fisk from PwC has told Checkpoint the company owes creditors $44 million, plus what's likely to be a significant amount to people who purchased life passes. He says the administrators are working with secured creditors to make skiing possible next season.
I can't tell you today that will definitely happen, but as soon as I have a bit of clarity, I'll be able to update you on that. But that is very much our aim, is that we want to be open for 2023.
John Fisk says 500 people attended the creditors' meetings today at Whakapapa and the PwC offices in Auckland and Wellington, and he's heartened by their commitment to get the business back on its feet. The Gloria Vale Leavers Trust is calling for a full inquiry into how the government let hundreds of children live with what they say was dangerous leadership. The Christian community was founded by Neville Cooper, who later became Hopeful Christian and who was convicted of child abuse. Rosanna Overcomer told the Abuse and Care Inquiry the community shouldn't have been allowed to continue. She says claims the community has changed its rulebook are false.
The abuse has not stopped with Hopeful, and documents do not change a deeply ingrained culture of abuse and mistreatment of victims.
Rosanna Overcomer says Christian wrote letters to her from prison when she was 10 years old, proving he was still very much in charge. The jury in the trial of a Wellington man on trial for rape and other sex offences has retired for the long weekend. The 25-year-old man pleaded not guilty to all charges, 4 of rape, 2 of unlawful sexual connection and 2 of indecent assault. The jury will begin deliberating again on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Auckland's Mayor has been talking politics today, first of all meeting with Auckland Central Green MP Chloe Swarbrick and then ACT Party leader and Epsom MP David Seymour. Topics under discussion included improving public toilets and trimming bureaucratic spending. Sally Wenley reports.
Chloe Swarbrick walked through parts of central Auckland with the new mayor, Wayne Brown, and says they had a robust meeting. Ms Swarbrick says they agreed that Ports of Auckland harbour frontage that's used to park imported vehicles should be changed to a public space. The Mayor then met with David Seymour and described their conversation as a meeting of minds on trimming wasteful bureaucratic spending. Mr Brown says he supports in principle the ACT Party's proposed housing infrastructure bill, which would transfer 50% of GST revenue from a new house to the local council that issued the consent.
Second-term Wellington City Councillor Laurie Foon has been named Deputy Mayor. The new Mayor, Tori Whānau, hand-picked the Green Party councillor, saying she has the respect of councillors based on her kindness and honesty. Laurie Foon says the promotion was unexpected and she took some time to think about the role, but says it feels like an amazing way to serve the city. The leaders of Britain's main opposition parties are calling for an immediate general election. Labour Party leader Keir Starmer says shuffling the people at the top without the consent of British voters isn't good enough. Labour's Foreign Affairs spokesperson, David Lammy, says the political chaos couldn't come at a worse time for the country. And traffic in Auckland has eased after a number of delays in the lead-up to Labour weekend, but Waka Kotahi is still warning travellers to expect some congestion if they're travelling outside the city due to road hazards between Puhoi and Wellsford and between Manukau and Bombay. Auckland Transport has also had to replace a number of its Birkenhead and Northcote ferry services with Ubers. And north out of Wellington is taking nearly 2 hours on the stretch from the Ngārara Road overbridge to Ōtaki. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dan Slevin has his eyeballs on the big screen for Shortcut. He's looking at post-apocalyptic worlds and muscle-bound movie stars, so we don't have to. Country Life is in its new time slot of 7 p.m, so we'll all be awake for that. And there'll be no nodding off for Finn Johansson's music picks. In with Finn, working title only. That's on Nights with Karen Hay. That's after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Rowan Quinn next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Taumaru Nui and Taihape, including Bay of Plenty. A few showers becoming confined to Northland tonight, then clearing tomorrow and becoming fine everywhere. From Taranaki to Kapiti, cloud and any remaining showers clearing today, fine tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Waded Upper and Wellington, mostly cloudy with isolated showers becoming confined to the coast this afternoon, then clearing to fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, fine, apart from a few showers about the ranges today. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, a few showers for Bulla and northern Westland. Canterbury has fine weather. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and isolated showers, clearing to fine this evening, frosts tomorrow morning. And for Kohu, the Chatham Islands, showers. It's 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
No mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint. I'm Rowan Quinn. The reaction to the overnight resignation of British Prime Minister Liz Truss has ranged from stunned surprise to palpable relief. After just 6 weeks as leader, Truss will become the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. Her tumultuous stint in Downing Street was marked by economic turmoil, political backflips and ministerial musical chairs. Among the possible replacements are the man Liz Truss defeated for the leadership, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and the man she replaced, Boris Johnson. Liz Truss leaves behind a deeply divided Conservative Party with its credibility in tatters and the opposition Labour Party calling for a general election. Here's the BBC's Chris Mason.
Lunchtime in Downing Street and the lectern is back. 6 weeks and 2 days since Liz Truss stood behind it as she became Prime Minister, she was back too. This time, to resign.
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability. Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent, and our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. I was elected by the Conservative Party with a mandate to change this. We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
So what on earth happens now?
This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
What an extraordinary moment. Just 3.5 months since Boris Johnson stood at that lectern and resigned himself. Now his successor has done just the same. The chaos deepens. Enter then this man, Sir Graham Brady, who the Prime Minister mentioned, who will oversee the race to replace Liz Truss. What's he got to say?
Good afternoon, everybody. There's not a great deal that I can say at the moment. I have spoken to the party chairman, Jake Berry, and he has confirmed that it will be possible to conduct a ballot and conclude a leadership election by Friday the 28th of October.
Do you accept that this is a complete dog's dinner?
It's certainly not a circumstance I would wish to see.
So what do the other parties make of it? The Conservatives' rivals say it's time for a general election. Call blimey, another opponent for you to face. What do you make of it?
Well, it is another opponent, and, you know, we're burning through prime ministers, we're burning through chancellors, we're burning through home secretaries, and that gives it an element of soap opera. But it isn't just a soap opera, and this is, you know, for many people who are facing higher prices, higher mortgages, this is real damage that's being inflicted on them. I really don't think that another revolving door of chaos, another experiment at the top of the Tory party is the way out of this.
The other night I asked her, will you lead the Conservatives into the next general election?
I will lead the Conservatives into the next general election.
Definitely.
Well, look, yeah.
And even yesterday she said,
I am a fighter and not a quitter.
Now it turns out she's done with fighting and she's quit.
Russia continues to deny that it's getting so-called kamikaze drones from Iran as airstrikes continue to hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The US claims it has proof that Iranians are helping to operate them, working from bases in Crimea. Meantime, on the battlefront, Russia is struggling to hold back the Ukrainian advance south. CNN's Fred Pleitgen reports.
As Ukrainian forces press their counter-offensive in the country's south, Russia is resorting to what appear to be increasingly desperate measures in the areas they control in the Kherson region. Thousands of people waiting to be evacuated by boat. The puppet authorities installed by Moscow claiming they've already taken some 15,000 out of Kherson city. Why did you decide to evacuate, the reporter asks. I have a small child to take care of, you see, the woman answers. Russia says it's ferrying these people to safety. The Ukrainians say these are little more than deportations. Russia has imposed martial law in this and other areas of Ukraine controlled by its forces. The Russians say they are increasing the intensity of their mobilization effort. Russian President Vladimir Putin visiting soldiers outside Moscow and himself even firing a sniper rifle. And Putin's continued aerial assault on Ukraine's energy infrastructure is starting to take a toll. Ukraine's authorities announcing the need for partial blackouts in most of the country as intense strikes on power plants continue using cheap kamikaze drones, which Kiev says Iran has provided to the Russian army. The spokeswoman for Russia's foreign ministry rejecting the allegations.
This is nothing more than a collection of unsubstantiated inferences and far-fetched assumptions that Britain and France are trying to build into a structure. And every time it all collapses in front of everyone.
But on Russian TV, this military expert and defense ministry advisor seemed to admit the origin of the drones, not realizing his mic was hot. He tells the host,
"Let's not shake the boat too much. We all know that they are Iranian, but the authorities do not admit that."
But the Russians are now admitting things are not going well on the battlefield. The top commander acknowledging his force's position in Ukraine's south is, quote, tense.
Just a quick traffic update now for those of you heading south out of Auckland for the long weekend. There's been a crash on State Highway 1 at Pokeno. Police say motorists should expect lengthy delays heading south out of Auckland. And the single vehicle crash happened near Nico Road before the State Highway 2 interchange. One person has received minor injuries. The road is partially closed. It's just one lane open there. And police say that this, along with all the long weekend traffic and poor weather, has resulted in traffic delays, and they're advising those travelling south out of Auckland to find an alternative route. It is 14 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Well, dozens of protesters have been killed in the Central African country of Chad as security forces reacted violently to demonstrators calling for a return to civilian rule. The clashes came as hundreds of people took to the streets to mark the date when the military was supposed to have handed over power. Instead, the military's extended its rule for another 2 years and imposed a curfew. The BBC's Ishaq Khalid is following developments from neighbouring Nigeria.
The opposition political parties in Chad called for street protests. So people took to the street demanding a transition to democratic rule. And that is to coincide with the 18-month period that the military-led government had promised to return to democracy when Mohamed Idris Deby took power in April 2021, last year, after the death of his father, Idris Deby, who was killed by rebels, according to the authorities on the front line. So this is exactly the day that they hoped the country would return to democracy. But initially, earlier this month, the government extended the transition period by 2 years until 2024. So the opposition political parties are not happy with that, and they're insisting that the country must return to democracy. So people barricaded major roads in the capital and N'Djamena and some other cities in the country. And later, the security forces responded. And now we are talking about 50 people killed, according to the government, and more than 300 others injured. And the Prime Minister of the country, Saleh Kebzabu, is suggesting that the death toll could rise. And the government has now imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew and has also announced that an investigation into the violence is going to take place. And 3 major political parties have now been suspended.
A style of living made famous by the Oscar-winning South Korean movie Parasite has turned into something of a death trap for Seoul residents. For some, basement dwelling is the only affordable housing option. But weeks after record floods hit the capital, thousands have been left languishing in ruined homes. The ABC's James Oaten reports.
Twice a week, a social worker visits 71-year-old Jung Won-yong for a welfare check. Won-yong lives in a semi-basement home called a banjiha. It has a couple of street-facing windows, but the home is built into the earth, underneath a larger structure. It's cramped, lacks natural light and has poor airflow. In August, the place was ruined during record flooding. The Laminate flooring remains bubbled and cracked. Black mould scars the walls and ceilings. Jung Wan-yong says he struggled for weeks.
It smelled so bad in the kitchen because of the mould. I rarely entered that room and only ate once or twice a day. My mental health was devastated.
The plight of those living in Banjiha was exposed when shocking news emerged that a family of 3, including a 13-year-old girl and her aunt who had Down syndrome, drowned in their home.
I couldn't sleep at night. I was constantly using buckets to collect rainwater dripping through the ceiling.
There are around 200,000 Banjiha in the capital, Seoul, but the semi-basement homes were never meant to be lived in. Park Mi-sun from the Korea Research Institute for Human Settlements says they rose to prominence in the 1970s.
National tension against North Korea, so the government forced the builders make space for bunkers, just in case attacking from the North Korea.
But for many of the city's disadvantaged, they're home. And in one of the densest and most expensive cities in the world, it's all they can afford, often due to expensive deposits required when signing up to new rental homes.
It's more than like a 10 times or 20 times or sometimes 100 times bigger deposit.
The government of Seoul has vowed to get people out of Banjiha over the next 10 to 20 years. After that, they'll only be allowed for commercial purposes. But building the extra homes necessary won't be easy, and those living inside Banjiha fear they'll be forgotten again. Here's Jung Wan-yong.
It's not just 1 or 2 homes that are Banjiha. There's a lot. The government only speaks when they're in a hurry. The situation will be forgotten.
Fortunately, Jung Wan-yong has been offered a new place, but resolving the housing crisis for thousands of others will prove much harder.
In Australia, unions are warning of the Uberisation of aged care, the use of independent contractors and online platforms to look after the elderly. Supporters say it can give people more choice, but not everyone's a fan. Opponents say the evidence shows that the standard of service is better when carers are ongoing employees. The ABC's John Daly reports.
Good morning. So what's happening today?
In the small rural town of Bell in southern Queensland, locals are taking an unconventional approach to aged care.
Oh, yeah.
The nearest centre is 45 kilometres away, putting the town's elderly residents at a disadvantage trying to get at-home services from major providers.
The traditional providers don't come out here unless there's substantial travelling charges, and they don't also have the workers that we need in these towns. People who had no family supports around here were forced with either moving into Dalby to, retirement units or, worst of all, really just struggling to manage at home.
That's Leslie Bryce, the founder of Bell Cares, which is a community-managed service that helps elderly residents access government-funded home care services. Bell Cares uses an online platform to match elderly people with independent contractors. The model is similar to what rideshare service Uber was to the taxi industry.
We also employ local Bell people as the support workers, so they're being looked after by people they know.
The Productivity Commission says this model of aged care has a place in the sector, particularly in home care. That contradicts the Aged Care Royal Commission's recommendation for direct employees to be preferenced in regulation. Commissioner Martin Stokey says stopping or restricting the use of independent contractors is a bad idea.
Aged care providers, and workers for that matter, already preference direct employment. We don't believe that there's a necessity to have a preferencing of a preference, and it's probably likely to be counterproductive.
Martin Stokey says it's also counterproductive to solving the sector's chronic shortage of workers.
Independent contracting, albeit very small, it's less than 4% of the workforce, is in fact an option which helps alleviate and provides choice and options for workers and for older Australians.
Health Services Union President Gerard Hayes disagrees and says contractors lack the appropriate oversight and scrutiny.
I think it's very dangerous for people in aged care. I think it's dangerous for workers
It's just not where we need to be going. We should be building the aged care system the way it was meant to be, and certainly how it was recommended to be out of the Royal Commission.
The Productivity Commission says the government should instead focus on fast-tracking the broader suite of reforms to come out of the Royal Commission.
Colombia is already the world's largest cocaine producer, but it could soon be making more, according to the United Nations. A record amount of the drug's main ingredient, coca, is being grown. More than 2,000 square kilometres of land, an area larger than London, was sown with the drug last year. That's a 43% increase on the year before. Most of Colombia's cocaine is smuggled to Europe and the US. The BBC's Kate Watson has more.
It's not the first time it's shot up. It's something that we've steadily seen. And I think it's worth pointing out that in 2016 there was a peace deal with FARC, the guerrilla group, and there were promises of subsidies and crop substitution as part of the peace deal, but a lot of those promises have been broken by the previous government. So what we're seeing is a continuation of coca growing, but not only that, but the crops are getting more efficient and people are getting better at growing them, so that the problem persists, if you like. And that's something that the new left-wing president, Gustavo Petro, talked about even in his inauguration speech. He's been very vocal about the war on drugs not working, failing the region, causing more deaths than necessary. And he's proposed regulating drugs. He's not gone so far as wanting to legalise them, but certainly he wants to try and make the industry, I guess, regulated in a sense that would mean be fair to all the people involved. I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that it's the people down at the bottom of the pyramid who are perhaps the ones who are struggling the most, the people who are growing the crops. And that's one thing he wants to do, is expand crop substitution programs, encourage people to grow other crops apart from coca, as well as looking at drug gang leadership, looking at funding in areas of social programs. I mean, I was in Colombia just a few months ago speaking to people there, and when you compare what they can get for a kilo of oranges versus a kilo of coca, it almost feels like a kind of no-brainer why they go back into illegal crops, because it's just so much more lucrative than the legal crops. But in terms of the support they get from the government and the help to be able to move away from the illegal crops, as well, of course, as pressure that comes from local drugs gangs. And that's something that we've seen since the peace deal, that when FARC disarmed, then there were other more informal groups that came in the void and carried on putting pressure on local farmers to keep growing the crops.
In India, Google's been ordered to pay a huge fine by the country's competition regulator. The US tech giant has been found to have taken unfair advantage of the dominant position its operating system enjoys in the country. It's been fined nearly $163 million. The BBC's Ashuna Shukala reports.
Well, India's antitrust regulator has said that Google has used the dominant position of its Android operating system that, according to some research in India, powers 97% of all smartphones in India. CCI says that they have used the dominant position of Android to protect and further the use of Google's own apps like YouTube or its search engine or Gmail or even Chrome, the web browsing Chrome. They've said that, making it mandatory for all smartphone users that use Android as their operating system, making it mandatory for them to pre-install Google apps and not allowing for those apps to be uninstalled by the users after setting it up, is making it an uncompetitive practice in the market. The antitrust regulator has also said that in certain cases, like the search engine, the Google search engine, Google has made it literally total exclusion of competition on the smartphone. So they have asked Google to allow for other apps to be pre-installed, or at least for the Google apps to be able to be uninstalled later, and to give options to the user for search engine. Now, Google has been facing a raft of antitrust concerns in India as the government tightens tech regulations in the country, and this case is very similar to what Google faced in Europe, where it also had to pay a fine of about $5 billion for forcing smartphone makers to pre-install its apps.
Well, finally tonight, let's head to the US, where a Boston businessman and billionaire is giving away $1 million a week. And the telecommunications boss says he'll be doing it every week for a year. So how does he choose who gets the money? Paul Burton explains.
We're blessed. We're very fortunate. And our belief is that we should extend those good tidings as deeply into the community as possible.
Rob Hale has deep pockets, but even a bigger heart. He runs Granite Telecommunications in Quincy, and for the past year, he and his wife Karen have been on a very unique mission of gifting $1 million a week to small nonprofits for 52 weeks straight.
There were so many vital, impactful, smaller organizations in our communities that needed help, and let's give a gift of $1 million a week, 52 weeks in a row.
The impact of their giving is being felt throughout the state, including former New England Patriots lineman Joanne Druzzi, who runs the Joanne Druzzi Foundation, which supports cancer patients.
To receive the phone call from Rob out of the blue and tell me and my wife that he loves what we do.
He invested $1 million, right, into an endowment for the Joanne Druzzi Foundation. I mean, and that's a major gift.
Many of the $1 million donations are going towards endowments to help nonprofits like South Shore Stars sustain itself.
It meant the world to us. It also has allowed us to ensure that we have funding for this coming year.
The Hale family has already gifted tens of millions of dollars to local hospitals and institutions. But for most of these smaller nonprofits, this is the single largest gift they've ever received. And many have been around for more than 20 years.
For Sue Chandler at Dove, Domestic Violence Ended, the Hale gift will directly impact victims and survivors they serve.
This is absolutely our biggest gift ever, and we're looking for the possibility of a new building.
For Hale, whose photo is now on the cover of Forbes magazine, he knows the need is endless, which is why he and his wife enjoy giving so much.
When you realize that you're helping other people who then are going to help other people, it makes you feel so good. To me, it's a gift that we actually get.
Well, that's it from us. The late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Just a wee reminder, if you're heading out of Auckland, that there is a bit of traffic. There's been a crash on State Highway 1 at Pokeno, and the police say that motorists should expect lengthy delays there. The single vehicle crash happened before the State Highway 2 interchange, and the road only has one lane open. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news there. I hope if you're in that traffic and everybody else has a lovely weekend. That's it from Checkpoint until Monday.
NZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora, I'm Evie Ashton. WorkSafe admits it has no way of knowing how many of $400,000 in COVID breach fines have actually been paid. Administrators say COVID and long-deferred maintenance issues have left Ruapehu Alpine Lifts with a $44 million deficit. The jury in the trial of a Wellington man on trial for rape and other sex offences has retired for the long weekend. And a Belgian restaurant owner is asking customers to pay €1 per head towards his spiralling energy costs. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Country Life, a large crowd has flocked